My name's Todd M. Casey, and welcome to Shop Talk. This is an interview series where I sit down with artists in their studios where we tell stories, talk about our experiences, but also offer our expertise. These interviews are unscripted in how discussions often are in artist studios. Please join me as I talk with artists and, of course, talk shop. So we were talking about the Alma Tadema, right?
Yeah.
And you love Alma Tadema. Mm-hmm. I love Alma Tadema. Have you ever seen the Alma Tadema?
Oh yeah. They have a really good one. At the Clark Museum.
Oh, that's right.
In Williamstown. I don't know if they were the young women who are drugged, or they're all kind of strewn out along the floor.
Yeah.
And there's older women trying to help them. That painting is phenomenal. And there's actually a lot of stuff that's shifting in it if you look really closely. So I had the pleasure of going with Jeffrey Larson and his son when they came out for a dinner that we did out here.
That's awesome.
So we went and had a good conversation about him, and he's just an incredible artist. He's got work at MFA too. So.
Yeah, I think that's the first time I was introduced to him. I remember, like at Mass Art where I went to school, we were taught draw with your left hand and draw with your right hand and do the outline, contour, and all this stuff. I remember going to the MFA, which is right next to Mass Art, and it was free. It was free for students, and the Gardner Museum right next door. And I didn't spend enough time at the Gardner. But I would go to the MFA every day because my brother was in college with me at the same time, and I was always waiting for him to get the train back home. And in the room with the Jerome at L'Eminence Gris, one of the Grey Cardinal walking down the stairs, and everyone's kind of bowing to him. Right to the left was always a Alma Tadema. And I just thought, every time I walked into that room, there was another one around the corner too. There was like an abbey, Edwin Austin Abbey. But I was like, where is this? Where is this training? And for me, that was kind of, it really comes full circle, because I remember going back and studying with Jake and seeing the connection to the French Academy and Jerome in there. And Alma Tadema is English, but he's connected to it too, isn't he?
I don't know his history. I know he's an academician. He was, I think he was president of the Royal Academy of Fine Arts at some point, I think. But I don't know. So I just know he's phenomenal. Yeah. And he was super famous.
Well, the Getty also has an awesome one.
Yeah.
I think the wedding.
That's phenomenal. So when I made the reference downstairs, we were looking at earlier Jeffrey Ripple in our collection here in New Salem, and the optical stuff at the Getty of the Alma Tadema there blew my mind, because it was very clear that what he was going for with the edges of the figure in front and the group behind was literally just when they would push the boundaries of, it's almost like those puzzles and things, those magic eye pictures. Yeah. But they were doing it so sophisticated with edge work that you really look, and it does look like space between. Yeah. As hard as I focus on it too, it was blowing my mind that the control of values and edges and the sophistication of being able to trick the viewer. It's almost like a magician, wanting to trick you, to make you think that person was in front of the rest. And so that's a different, let alone referencing what we were talking about with the path to get there, that's a whole nother conversation. But the final result was incredible.
Yeah, the Yale Museum actually has one too, and it's on wood, and it's very bent. Oh, really? I noticed it every time, because I'm like, you can see it warping out of the frame. But I think, our prior discussion was talking about working methods and how Alma Tadema, it seems like he worked out his ideas, and in the last color book, I have one of the studies for a study of Heliogabalus. I forget the name of it, if I said it correctly, but it was like, you can see that almost like what we would do at Water Street, like a poster study, that there was an evolution from that to the final. But the one that you and I were chatting about was that there was a working process that was more of like blocking it in and then working from large to small, perhaps.
Or just unknown to known.
Yeah.
Like the
figuring the picture out.
Yeah, I talk about it a lot that, let's say I do a portrait, even if it's, well, anything. Let's just say the journey of painting, that from the moment of conception to the finish, it's really like a process of organizing data and getting to know what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
And it's this journey of organizing that data. And then the final result is this culmination of your hard work experience, So the fact that path was so kind of meandering for someone as skilled as Amatadama is a fascinating thing to contemplate in our time, where things seem a little bit more rigid or predefined. So that I like that because it allows for poetry. It allows for the unknown, which is mysterious, and the profound. So that is deeply embedded in some of these old masterworks. Yeah. Rembrandt, Titian, just you name it, I guess. Of like, it's not just this like superficial pass of oil paint. It's this deep searching that it wasn't always easy,
Yeah, it's being active, right? And in the process involved. So it's not so much of an execution, it's a dance. I mean, that's usually when I talk to my students, I'm always saying I'm dancing with the painting, not literally, but it's like I'm engaged in it, and as it moves, I move. It leads me, I lead it, and we're back and forth. Therefore, if the idea was not as well thought out, it can move with me. And I think I saw that one of your earlier works. I maybe still do it a lot, where like you had something on the right side. I think it was a skull or something, and it was a self-portrait, and then you got rid of it or scraped it or something. Is this something you do in your process a lot?
Unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, I always tell the story of, so early on in my career, there was a painting that was in my first show that was, it was a portrait of a girl on a chair, and there used to be a chair to the left of her, and the canvas used to be much wider, and the background used to be a different color. So there was these major shifts throughout the process, because it sat there, and I was like, I really wanted to throw it away. Yeah. And I thought it was a failure, and then I decided I was going to take out the second chair and cut it more vertical. But then it was still kind of like, I felt like it was still too boring, which looking back on it, I actually like it. It was fine. But there was something at the moment that the light gray background was killing me, and I needed to darken it down. And so like just right before the show, I needed to use the painting because I had a number of paintings that were, and I just kind of toned to the background and lifted it with a rag and stuff, and people loved it, but that's not planned. That's not, that's not like predetermined. That's just part of the struggle of getting there. And I think that's a big part of art that is overlooked. That mastery is a good thing because you're not victim to the technical aspect of, you're not literally the slave, you're the master. So that's important, to be in control of what you're doing. But you don't want it to be boring either. And I think when I look back at someone like Emil Carlson, his notes, there's the Emil Carlson archive, and you can see, I think I read somewhere that he would paint on a large sheet, like a large canvas, unstretched, and then he would stretch it after, because he was like, I don't quite know what the composition is. Sure.
But it really lends itself to like being actively involved
Yep.
and taking the painting where it needs to, or making a decision that wasn't so much planned. And there's definitely a lot of even science behind that, where you hear TED Talks about the Keith Jarrett. I don't know if you know the Keith Jarrett thing, where Keith Jarrett went and played in Germany, and he, jazz musician, and he agreed to do a concert, and then when he got there, the pedals were not working, and part of the keyboard wasn't, and he was like, I can't play this, and I think he ran out to his car, and the woman who had put it together was like, we have to do this concert, it's sold out. He said, you know what we'll do, we'll record it, just so you'll know that we'll never do it again. This is actually a TED Talk too, I should send to you. And what he did was he played on this this piano that wasn't even making the right sounds he wanted, and he had to play it like powerfully to play it for the whole audience. And he ended up having to be very creative in doing that, and he made the number one of the top 3 selling jazz albums of all time because of it. But it was because he had to kind of improvise in the moment. He still knew how to play, but he had to like take, and what was planned was put aside.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah, it is fascinating. I paint on panels for that reason too, because it's easy to cut them.
Yeah.
So you can leave it a little bit bigger, or usually I'm going down versus up.
Yeah. So
there's always a cut or something that gets left. Like right now on the pieces that I have, I'm thinking there's at least like 4 out of the 12 that are going to be cut.
Yeah. It's always, I do that too. And have you taken one to like a table saw, or do you cut it with a...
I just do with the ACM panels. I lock it down with a ruler, and then I do the X-Acto blade, score it, and break it.
Yeah, I've done it with a table saw, and I was like, this could go the wrong way quickly. And one time I took a piece of birch that I painted on and cut the whole side off, and I was like, that worked. Yeah. So sometimes I'm like, this is a 50-50 shot.
Yeah.
But
especially when you need it, it's a piece that, the table saw I'm not super comfortable with, so just never use them. So.
Yeah. But I think, I love that method too. And I think it was freeing to me. Like when I read that about Carlson, I was like, that's how, like sometimes I'm very planned, and it's the graphic designer working for Ralph Lauren for like 10 years. Very, very planned. We would plan it into the body of the t-shirt or whatever we were doing. But then there was the kind of unplanned side of it. And I like to always like tinker between a couple of ideas. And sometimes I know exactly what I want the composition to do, and now it's about execution. And then sometimes I'm like, I don't quite know. Maybe I just want to play today and try out a medium or technique or something, or color.
Yeah, I think if I can offer anything to people, I think it's it's just that. It's like, I think the older you get, the more you realize that the thing you have to offer is the thing that you don't realize that people want. So you're always shooting to do something that like is, somehow further ahead of you, or thinking that you want to try to mimic something that you've seen. But in the end, what I've learned is that the fact that I don't hide anything from people when I'm painting or teaching or whatever, it's really useful for the student. And I critique, but I'm not like trying to make them feel bad. I'm just like, either I'll tell them it's good, or there's something that bothers me, and I just go through a list of things. But I'm not trying to make them feel bad, because I know it's hard. And I never liked critiques. My wife can tell you that.
To give them or get them?
Get them. And I don't like to give them either. I don't like confrontation at all. Yeah. But to get them either, I don't like. So if I were to turn around and intentionally try to damage someone, knowing that they're in a position of vulnerability as a student, that would be really bad.
Yeah.
Especially if I don't like it.
Well, it's so hard too, because it's like, I think the critiques end up being on the technical side of like capturing what you see, but a lot of the times it's like the vision should be a part of it as well, and you can intentionally distort things, almost like once you learn the rules, don't be used by the rules, you know. And I think a lot of the time at the beginning, the students are just trying to grasp how to paint from life, which is a little bit easier to teach, I think, you know. And then it's like, once it comes to like, what's your vision? What do you want to say? Then I'm like, I don't even know. I can help you with like inspirational ideas or ways in which I find inspiration, but you're kind of, you're going into the forest and you need to go alone and do it.
Yeah, being an artist is extremely difficult. And I think there's a lot of other things that obviously are super difficult. So, you know, but I think the difference is like I was chatting with my brother this morning, and he works an office job, and he didn't have anything to do, and he was kind of making his own schedule because he was freed up, and he said, I'm kind of like you, I have to try to force myself to do something. Because he knows that every day I could wake up, I mean, I wouldn't be able to probably be here if I was that kind of person, but when there's no one like, you know, really pressuring you to do anything, an artist can just kind of be like,
Did you ever have a period where you tried to like not do art or anything? Like, no, just always did it?
I never could. It was the only thing I ever could do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I had a moment
for either good or bad.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I had a moment where I tried to take it out of my life, or see if I could. And it was kind of like, to me, the moment of truth. And it was kind of like it was after college, very confused with the education, didn't know if I could make money doing it. And then I was like, I did construction. I was a mailman for a year. I did all these like random things. And I just said, I'm going to take art out of it and just like, maybe I'll follow my dad's footsteps. He was a mailman. I'm like, maybe I'll just do that. And I just found myself like, I couldn't not do it. Like it just was a part of me. And then I just found myself right back over at the table or the easel. And I think what it did was it relieved the pressure of having to create for somebody else and put it into like, what is it that you want to say? And it was the beginning of the journey for me of like, you need to figure out you first, you know?
Yeah, no, it's so like I go through a lot of ups and downs, as many artists do. And there was a moment where I didn't have any images that I wanted to share with the world. So in other words, like early on in my career, I had this deep kind of like longing to share this image with people. So in other words, obviously the final painting, but the way it is read in our culture, magazines, on your phone, all that stuff is an image. It's So for me, when I was in New York, leaving Minneapolis, studying in New York, I really wanted to do like that dark impressionism, which is like DeCamp and Tarbell, and I had that kind of longing to share that vision, that dark beauty, I guess. And just recently, maybe, I don't know, maybe it was during the pandemic or after, I kind of felt like I didn't really have images that I needed to share. And so there was a point where I was kind of questioning, I was like, if I'm not really like dying to get this out, like I don't have this vision for something, then it's probably not going to happen. And I'm finally kind of getting back to a point where I do have something that I think I can say in a particular field, and it feels good, because otherwise you're kind of left wandering in the dark and you don't know where you're looking. It's just kind of like, well, you know, do I paint another flower because someone's going to pay me for it? Like, I don't want to. I just don't want to. Like
Yeah.
and so you really get into that, like, there has to be more.
Yeah.
If this is going to sustain me for the next 20, 30, 40 years of
Yeah.
potential working years, what the hell am I going to do? That's like you have to figure out, like, you can't just pay bills. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a huge part of it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me to, like, sit up in the studio and act like, but at a certain point it starts to eat away, and it was eating
Right.
away at my soul. Like, I couldn't do
Fulfillment.
another, flower painting just because someone's going to pay me. I've taken a little bit
Yeah.
of a break because it's just, I can't, it's like almost like it's a really gross feeling. And people love them, and I get it, but I just can't.
Yeah.
If I did that for 20 more years, I'd rather not do it.
Yeah. I feel similarly about the cocktail paintings, in which I did them because it was like, there's a humorous side of me.
Yeah.
And part of also coming out of, our training, we come back to the question of, like, what is it you want to say and what do you want to paint? That's a very hard thing to figure out. But then there's the, like, can I get myself into a daily practice, almost like what your brother's saying, to be, like, motivated to just paint, right? And actively stay sharp.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't want to be like, I'm not Cezanne. I don't think apples you can say everything with apples, right? And I was like, maybe I could just take and set up still lifes that were a bit narrative, and cocktails always had a name tied to them.
Yeah.
And I was like, I could put a ship in the background if it's a dark and stormy. Like, the props kind of made the narrative. And then from there, it was like, be careful what you wish for, because then that started to take off in the gallery, and then I had a show, and now the commissions still come in from it. But my heart is not there most of the time. And I've slowed them, but the gallery wants more of them. And then when I get contacted from other galleries, that's what they want. So I've kind of, I think I've taken a step back as well to kind of push out. Maybe that's what the pandemic did for some people, turn us inward to search for the things that we want to do. But I always had this feeling that, like, if I wanted a day job and kind of listen to people, I would have stayed there. And that's what I was doing at Ralph Lauren. And that's not what I want my career to be. There's a lot of self-expression and ideas. So I'm always working through it as well.
Yeah, like, so the painting of my wife in our kitchen area, it's not ours, but that was destined for there. And I knew that there was going to be artists through this location. And I had to do something that made it still clear in people's minds that I wasn't just a flower painter. That it's like, that part of me is not gone. So for your audience who's not able to see the picture, it's a life-size figure painting of my wife outdoors. And a lot of people love it, and it's in our private section. So the artists are the ones who see it at dinner, and, But I specifically did it, one, because I was able to again, to do art that I didn't have to have the rat race of being in New York City, of, like, just churning out to pay bills.
Yeah.
But also to give other people a vision of, this is, let's do this, let's make good art, like, you know what I mean? It's not just the small stuff, like, sometimes you gotta do those like cool paintings that, like, so.
There was an awesome quote actually by Harvey Dunn, and I think, because he was an illustrator. You know Harvey Dunn, right? North Dakota. I think he lived up there, and he's at the North Dakota or the Prairie Museum. Okay. Illustrator, studied with Howard Pyle, the teacher of, like, Dean Cornwell and a lot of the awesome illustrators that I'm sure you admire them too. And of course, illustrators worked for Cosmo and all these magazines. And one of the women at the magazine said, Mr. Dunn, Mr. Dunn, you don't have to put in all this work, to make them elaborate. We just need it for the article. And he said, ma'am, I report to one person and make them happy, and that's Mr. Dunn.
Yeah.
And you could tell, I mean, that's the thing.
Awesome.
It's the heart, right? That we want to make sure that is present in our work, and sometimes it feels almost like we're working for a market, right? And to avoid it, and it's not that you want to avoid it, it's more of like, I don't just want to paint for that. And I'm always like, I'll do one. I don't hate doing cocktails. It's not what I want to. I don't want to be the Thomas Kincaid of cocktail painting,
Yeah, yeah. It's. I think it's just certain people are able to sleep at night, knowing that the bills are being paid, they're doing what they love, and so be it. If you do 1,000 cocktail paintings, then you made a good run of it.
Shoot me.
But yeah, for some other people, that's like, I'd rather starve.
Yeah.
And
I
not
do
be
an
a
office
painter.
job.
I'd do an office job or whatever. Yeah, it's something that people are just wired different, and I really think that it is a personality difference because it's not just being irresponsible, because I feel like I have plenty of responsibility in my life. I make deadlines, I make commitments. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I'm being irresponsible. I just would rather not do it.
Yeah.
If it's going to be my soul, because that's the thing that no one understands. If it's going to be torture for me, I understand there's a paycheck at the end of the road, but if it's torture for me, then I don't want to do it.
Yeah, it just starts to feel like a job. And I think I really feel like, artists are poets, and it's like we're just trying to, it's a form of expression, and we're trying to get something out. And just because I feel some way about a feeling today doesn't mean that's how I feel tomorrow. And I feel like, there's so many good quotes out there, about not being the same person today that I was earlier. I think there's a Lewis Carroll quote of Alice in Wonderland, and it's like, I don't want to go back to yesterday because I'm not that person anymore. And it's like, how could the artist not change daily and stretch your mind? And everywhere I go, I'm always like looking for something and seeing a painting and being like, it fires off something else that I write down. It's not like I want to go back and now paint another cocktail.
Yeah. So an example of that. So I like doing little landscapes from life, but I don't ever sell them.
Yeah.
And so if I do too many of them, then I'm being irresponsible.
Yeah.
Like, if I just go around and paint all the time and never worry about if these things are ever going to find a home, then I'm not actually being a professional artist. I'm being a hobbyist.
Yeah.
But the fact that I have shows and I have deadlines and I have things that need to be done, that's where it tips it into the professional realm, where there's not only is there like a career I'm thinking about long term, just because I'm mid-career and it could go down really easily from here, or it could keep it could be a mature career, let's say. It could at least continue to somehow go somewhere. And if I neglect that responsibility too much and I just paint from life because I enjoy it, like it's the thing that really brings joy, it's like, it's a fun activity. Being outside in the open air, seeing the colors, just
experience.
Yeah, not being in front of a stupid computer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, but my business model is not selling those small little sketches. My business model is selling my finished paintings that are different, completely different from that. So that's an example of, like, you just have to, some people would say, well, why don't you just switch and sell the small little sketches? Yeah. But the second I start selling the small little ones, then the same pressure will be on the small little ones.
Yeah.
Then I'll have to go out and paint.
Yeah.
And I'll have to ship these things. So if you can keep something that's kind of like the thing that still is the joy factor. That's the untouched.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I found that, in looking at a lot of older artists too, like monographs and stuff like that, there's almost a perception of like the artist that we see, and then there's the rest of their work. Like the presentation of even an artist in a museum, you'd think like, this is what they did, right? But a lot of the time you'd be like, oh my gosh, like N.C. Wyeth did illustrations, right, for all these fantastic magazines, but he did all these amazing still life paintings that I know you and I talked about when we did the live stream. And he said in his book, there's like letters that he sent to his family, was just that if you gonna bang out a still life every once in a while, it'll just keep your spirit up there.
That's cool.
But it's like, and then he looked at like Andrew, and he was envious of Andrew, I believe, because Andrew was able to follow almost like the true artist life, rather than being at the whim of right, or the mercy of a market.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could always find something to complain about, and or you could find something to be positive about. So I'm sure there's tons of people who work a 9-to-5 job and just are dying to like get to the easel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a totally different world from what I've ever known. So I don't know how to relate to it because I never had that.
Yeah.
It's always been painting all my life, never anything else. So there was never that like, oh, if I could just stop doing this and put more hours in the bucket of painting.
Yeah.
So it's just I've been this all my life.
I think there was somewhere, and I feel like I've quoted you at this too, and maybe I set the record straight here by asking you. I feel like I heard in an interview with you once, because I've followed your career, love your work, that someone asked you like how many hours a day do you paint? You said like 3 hours. Is that correct? Or something like that? Yeah, and that's actually where I am. I'm almost like kindred spirits here, because I go in the studio when I want to paint, and if I want to go in the studio and I don't want to paint, I'll gesso a panel or stretch something or do something that's actively in the space that makes me at least feel like I did something. But the idea that like I have to paint 16 hours a day or I'm not a painter, I was like, well, I guess I didn't get the memo on that, because I do like 3 hours tops and then my brain's exhausted. Yeah. Is that correct?
And that's very correct. Yeah. So it's gotten less actually, which is. But if I need to get something done, it'll bump up to about 3. But typically, and I know it sounds counterproductive, but if I can have a good hour and a half of dedicated painting time, then that's all I need to produce sufficient work for every avenue that my Patreon stuff, my galleries, an hour and a half. If I do that daily, definitely. I don't even do it daily.
Yeah, same here. And I feel like there's a lot of dogmas and pressure that are put on people, or like romantic ideas that like you have to have North Light, even though it is fantastic, and you have it here. But what if you don't? What if you're in a New York City apartment? Like I was in a junior 1-bedroom in Forest Hills with my wife, and I'm like, we're not going to blow a hole on the side here on the 29th floor to get natural light. It was like, well, how do I work around it? And it was like, just get lights that, first of all, I just need to paint. Then after that, I'll figure it out after, kind of jump in the deep end. But I definitely feel like there's definitely like a lot of, you're not a real painter if you don't do this. And I'm like, but Mike paints for like 3 hours.
It's one of those things where I didn't study like that, and I didn't start my career like that, but it's where I've ended up. So, and if I had a line of collectors wanting to pay 6 figures for my work, I don't know. I don't know if I would paint more or not. I don't know. It's never happened to me. So, I don't know what that. You can
I
do
don't think
another
you would.
interview if we ever.
I
did
don't
that.
think you would. I feel like you'd be.
I don't think I would.
Yeah, I feel
honestly
like
don't
you're in the
think I
same
would.
place that we're talking about with this whole conversation. That like, you paint and you put in and you do what you want, and it's a beautiful position to be in your career, right?
Well, so an example, I had a really pretty significant commission in 2021, and I got it done early, and I had kind of the same workflow. You know, it's like sitting there when I was doing other stuff, and I would work on it for a short period of time in this energetic burst. And I remember one time, so it was a diptych for a church in Florida, and it had all kinds of it was an allegory of it was a landscape, seascape, and at the time I was out on the Cape, and I was inventing a lot of it based off of all these studies that I had done. And one of the master bedrooms that we were staying overlooked the bay, the ocean, beautiful view right to the sunset. And one night it was like this glorious sunset, and it was like exactly what I needed. And I just ran downstairs in the garage and just like busted it out, and it was just, I was working up to it.
Yeah.
But it was like that one moment that I was like, that's exactly it. And I didn't take a picture. I just bolted to the basement and just I didn't finish it in that moment, but it was like the thing that confirmed that that's where I needed to go with it.
Yeah.
And you can never, you can't.
I wasn't planned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just happened to be like the thing that I needed to get it.
Divine intervention.
It really, I mean, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that brings me also to kind of, I think, or I would say, if you're only in the studio for 3 hours a day, you're probably like me, and I'm actively always thinking of art. Like the Robert Armory quote, I'm interested in art not as a way of making a living, but as a way of living. So I'm always like, when people say like, well, how do you work out your compositions, or how do you come up with ideas? And I'm like, I don't even know a time when I'm not. Like I just went, like driving in through here, we talked about the beautiful things that I had seen and how I would get out there and maybe do a landscape and it would fail because I'm not great at landscape, but I still do them. But like, I'm actively always looking. And again, I think it's back to kind of what we're talking about with the dance in the piece where you're actively involved. I'm always involved in looking and observing and being in the moment. Do you feel like you're like... No, I'm from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, it's not so much about visualizing that image, I guess. It's about the role I play as an artist in the world I live. So my role here as a director, my role as the founder of a company selling a little art gadget, push that button, you can say it.
And the role as a teacher, workshops, anything like that. Like there's always, what am I doing? So it's constant. Yeah. So I'm gonna turn a little bit. You had mentioned Jeffrey T. Larson, and you had the connection because you'd also mentioned Tarbell and Paxson. Yes.
And there seems to be a connection with Gamble and Lack and the American Impressionists.
Absolutely.
How did you find that? Like how are you connected?
Yeah. So what happened was, I hate to take it back to the younger days, but as I was graduating from high school, my life was really on a downward kind of spiral. It was there was no really hope. It was kind of bad, it's like I almost didn't graduate from high school. I was drinking a lot. It was just a lot. But I could paint and draw. So my high school art teacher encouraged me to apply for some scholarships. And I ended up getting 2 scholarships to Savannah College of Art and Design and to the American Academy of Art in Chicago.
Awesome.
And I turned both of those down, and I ended up going to a school where I didn't have to do the academic curriculum to sustain the scholarship. So I found a school. At the time, I didn't know anything about it, but it was right when the internet was kind of starting to become a thing in '99, and the husband of the wife of the owner of the school that I first stumbled upon, he was a kind of a computer geek, and so he had a website really early on.
Yeah, 99.
Yeah, and my mother, like out of her desperation, I think, trying to figure out what to do for her son, she stumbled upon this website.
Yeah.
And it was focused on just painting and drawing in the classical tradition because she had been denied opportunity by Richard Lack because she was too old and she was a female, which blows your mind that still, like in our time, it was a thing in like
one generation behind you.
It was probably in the 80s that she was trying to study.
Wow.
Or maybe, I don't know when. Yeah, I think it was like in the 80s. And so she had the school that was like, come as you are, kind of everybody paint, draw, sing, whatever, just get your hands dirty. And so right out of high school, I was thrown into still life painting, cast drawing, figure painting, everything, the whole curriculum condensed into this mishmash of introduction for a first year. And then I was like, I have to figure out some structure. So then I went to a different school, and that was the former instructors of Lack. They took over his kind of legacy.
Minnesota?
Yeah. And then that's kind of where Jeff comes into play, because he was really big, and he studied with Lack. And I was watching Jeff sell out shows, as I mentioned in the podcast that I did with Ted and Tony. So that was, I was seeing him sell paintings for a lot as, just kind of a kid who didn't know what the heck he was going to do with his life. That was and then the other person was Paul Oxborough. Paul Oxborough bought a painting from me when I was a teenager. And so it was kind of like it was like this ray of hope, I guess, that maybe I could do something with it. So,
That's so awesome.
Yeah, so that's the whole Boston kind of. And then the lady who started that school, her name is Patricia Jurdy. She took me here. She brought me out to the Clark MFA, the Isabel Stewart Gardner, when I was that first year because she saw potential in me. So it's really fascinating to be here in New Salem.
Back. Yeah.
Because I remember 20 years ago, longer, 25 years ago almost now, seeing the trees of the Northeast, because I'm a Midwest kid. Yeah. And I remember seeing the trees of the Northeast and driving around this area. It shoots me back to that moment.
That's amazing. That's so cool. Yeah. Wait, and Lack was also a student of Gamble, right?
Yeah.
Which means he probably studied on the Cape?
So, Gamble was in actually close to, he had a summer place over close to Williamstown, a studio, and then he was at Fenway Studio. Yeah. So they were back and forth between the two.
Oh, so Boston, Fenway Studio. Boston. Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah. I love it. It's so fascinating. We have a lot of overlap, by the way. I got a scholarship to Savannah College of Art and Design.
Did you go?
No, I didn't go. I didn't get one to the other one, but in high school, I no one in my family went to college. My mom went to like community college for like a semester, and my dad didn't graduate high school. So for me to go anywhere or to go to college was like uncharted. No one had ever done it. And I had won an award and got a couple. That's how I got the scholarship, and just thought like, cool. Nice. I don't like Savannah seems like a country away. Yeah. So I went to Boston, and that felt far from Lowell, Massachusetts. Yeah. Right. Which is really 20 miles, but for us it was like you're gonna venture out of Lowell and go to Boston.
Nice.
But yeah, there's definitely like. Being in Boston and going to school there, I didn't realize that there was so much history, and again almost the circle for me to come back. Like James McNeill Whistler was born and raised in Lowell. I found that out later. Aldred T. Hibbard was from Lowell. Leroy Metcalf was
Yes.
Lowell.
Yep.
There's a lot of like
I
art.
didn't realize
and
he was, okay.
It's crazy.
I knew he was obviously from this area. Oh, like Thayer.
Yeah,
It was just close by here.
amazing.
And he lived outdoors all year long, which blows my
You
mind.
could be seeing them, right? Driving down the street.
It blows
painting
my
something.
mind that they slept in the winter outside here.
Well,
Just
and even,
because he was a freak about, he was worried about illness.
really,
Yeah, he had a bunch of outdoor bedrooms that they all slept in.
wow. And Wyeth is from outside of Boston too. Not Newton, but one of the towns.
Born.
Yeah.
Sydney lived in Maine, and
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Lewiston, I think, and then they moved down to Chadsford
Mm.
to be closer
Mm.
to the Howard Mile, I think.
mm,
Yeah, it's fascinating, but the thing with Boston is that I came back and I was like, I don't know what the heck Copley Square was, and I'm
Mm.
like, oh, John Singleton Copley,
mm,
and
yeah,
and then I was like, wait a minute, I searched and had to go to New York to study
Mhm.
with Jacob, but just like you did, to get to the French academic tradition, but
Mhm.
there was another road in through Boston into
Mm.
these guys, Tarbell and
Yeah.
Haxon.
yeah.
Haxon was a student of Bouguereau.
And the exciting thing, that's what kind of keeps me going, I guess, is that even though with all the internet, all the connections, all the the web of, there are still people who don't know about any of this.
It's
There's
crazy.
tons of people who don't know about any of this.
Wow.
So like when people walk through the museum, they're like, this is fascinating. The ages of the kids doing this stuff is insane. Like, like the idea that someone could be living and painting like this is still like just so foreign for people. It's getting a little bit more with Instagram, just the popularity of like photorealism and YouTube and Instagram. That's reached millions of people. But
Yeah.
it's only millions. There's billions on the planet. It's like there's
Yeah.
so many people who just don't have access to this little tribe of art that is,
Yeah.
it's really fun.
When you got to get them in here, not looking on
Oh,
Instagram.
Yeah, no.
Would
it's
you
totally
call
different.
this photorealism?
No. What we've gone with, and it is what it is, but contemporary realism.
Yeah.
So whether it's realism or not, I don't know, but that's how people identify with it today
Yeah.
in our culture because it's a realistic image. But yeah, contemporary realism is the
Yeah.
term we've just kept.
Yeah. It really is an awesome, awesome museum,
Mm.
but also just an awesome state with a ton of history here too.
Yeah, it's
Like,
really great.
Everywhere you go.
Yeah.
Because also, what's next to Maynard, Concord,
Mhm.
where a lot of the transcendentalists lived,
Mm.
like Thoreau, I think, and Emerson
Mm.
were both living there. So it's almost like wherever you want to
Mhm.
go
Mhm.
in Massachusetts. I didn't realize all this.
Mm.
Even Kerouac, Jack Kerouac's from
Mm.
Lowell, and I did know that, but I'm like, there's always something that I'm like, coming back to Massachusetts, like, let's go see the Herman Melville House and not Springfield, like right next to it. And I'm like, holy crap, he lived up
Mm.
here too.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, rich history. The Sargent exhibition, and thinking of him and Bunker and just
Yeah,
all the people
yeah.
that come through New York and Boston, and obviously they're big metropolitan areas, but it's just nice to have that connection.
Have you got into? Obviously, you mentioned the American Impressionists. They're some of my favorites.
Mm.
Like American Impressionists, Fontaine Latour.
Mm.
It's kind of the ones that straddle the realism and impressionism. I like impressionism a lot. I love the idea of it, and I love
Mm.
the playfulness of it. But there's a bit more towards the academic side that I'm like. That's why Fontaine Latour seems like the perfect. And you named
Mm.
your
Mm.
dog after
Mm.
Fontaine, right?
Yeah.
Have you dug into like in between New York and Boston? A lot of like the Connecticut artists, because a lot of them live there too.
No, I haven't actually. I mean, if you could name off names that were part of the old Lyme kind of colony, I'm sure I would know some of them.
Yeah,
But I don't research based off of location. It's more off of like brushwork and color harmony.
Yeah, no,
Yeah. So whether they live in Africa or
yeah.
France, I'll if they're good, I'll follow.
So what's some of your favorites then of the?
Oh gosh, I mean, there. If I could make a plug just for a channel that is really cool that I've been obsessed with lately is the Gamelak Institute on YouTube. Have you ever seen their videos?
I don't know who runs it.
I don't know who runs it, but they're the best. I just enjoy them because they're short, educational snippets about 19th century artists that, and there's just a handful of artists that like I kind of was familiar with, but they were like the most famous of their time. You know, I'm just trying to think of an example.
Like Emile Friant or something.
A perfect example. Yeah, I mean, I like Emile Friant and haven't really like done a deep dive of his work, but maybe like Reynaud. Like
Henry Reynaud.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to go see it at the Daesh.
Okay, yeah.
They had the Spaniard, and he was like standing with a sword.
Okay.
And then I would go and see the J-Lo. I call it the J-Lo one, the one with
what is
at the Met.
Yeah, with the knife and the plate. Is it?
Yeah.
Salome, is it?
But then the one at the MFA Boston is the guy with the horse, Archimedes or something, and he's like going like this, and the horse is up over him. And I remember walking in that room and being like, why is everyone walking by this masterpiece? And then next to him was like, what's his name? Hippolyte. De La Roche.
To the left, yeah.
And then to the back was a Mancini, St. John the Baptist, on a rock. And I was like, why is no one in this room?
Yeah. Now they have Manet and Millet, but that's like the best room. We were just there after the Sargent exhibit, looking at those paintings particularly. And yeah, it's like, so who would be another one? I'm trying to think of, you know, I like the naturalist artists, Lepage and Daniel Bouveret and a lot of the Boston painters, but I don't study them as much now. They were just really influential in my life because I looked at them so much when I was younger. Yeah. Russian artists, you know, that's kind of obvious
Repin,
for everybody. Yeah.
Kronskoy.
But even now, most recently, the Taos artists, I went out to Taos to study them. It's the same kind of thing. It's a group of artists who came from France. They settled in Taos, and you know, it's the same lineage. So really, it's this idea of like a cool art that was coming out of 19th century France.
Yeah.
That affected the world in a big way. So. Oh wait.
Need to get it?
No, we'll pick it up.
So maybe just say coming out of 19th century France.
So yeah, there was a really incredible amount of work coming out of 19th century France that just affected the world. You know.
Yeah, you know the work of Guy Rose and how he went to California and I think affected the California Impressionists too.
Yeah.
And then I think everyone's favorite painter who did the composition book.
The landscape book?
Yeah, Thomas Paine, is it? Yeah. I mean, those are great too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so interesting because it's almost like it seemed like what was happening was they go to Paris and then they come back and then start something like Eakins did at, I think, was it PAFA? And then you see Ann Schutz and all these artists come out in pockets. Tarbell and Paxton started the MFA Boston School, which has nothing to do anymore with those two. But then you see kind of the ripple effect, even the Art Students League of New York. And I started to do a whole lineage thing, like just to see like who studied with who and where some of these echoes may have come from. You know, Warm Light, Cool Shadow, Don't Use Black, Out of a Tube, things like that. Or even like just materials or palettes or colors and stuff like that. That's really what the color book started to do. was to kind of dig in and be like, everybody, Larson's in the book and his palette's in there, and it's very extensive because he loves color. And then you have these much more narrower French academic low chroma palettes. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of the book, was seeing the palettes next to the paintings, because unless you sit down and actually ask your friend to write out their palette, or you take a workshop with them, which I don't take a lot of workshops. So I'm very rarely ever seeing their palette next to their painting. So having that in publication is really, really nice. I like that because it just allows you a different perspective of looking at their work in print.
I get asked as a teacher, like, why do you have the colors on your palette? Or that it, I think that they think that I have it all figured out so I can hit anything I want, or there is a lot of rhyme or reason, but a lot of the time I don't think that there is. I think it's really, perhaps it was a bit of rhyme and reason at one point, and now it's just like, I study with Mike Klein, that's his palette. I worked with Mike, that's what I use. And then I studied with so-and-so, so I pulled this random color called Sleeping Beauty or whatever it is over. And I think that's kind of what it is. And then my favorite part of that book, one of the most favorite parts, was talking to people about the colors that they had on their palette, and then why and what systems they used to think about color when they're mixing. And I think there was a lot more heart in their decisions than there was head.
So my idea that I want to do with Michael Harding is, I want to use more colors than I would buy, because I actually do want to expand my palette, but it's expensive. So I want to do a really big palette of colors and call it the Michael Harding palette. So in other words, like, it's just a huge selection of his colors, but then when people ask me, what do you use? I use the Michael Harding palette. It's just this array of painting, of paints that are all Michael Harding colors.
Yeah.
But that like, it's just a thing.
Yeah.
It could be a thing, like the Michael Harding palette.
What do you mostly use now?
So I have pretty consistently in the lower left of my palette, I have the three least saturated primary colors. So I use Old Holland for those three because they tend to be kind of separate, but raw umber is the neutral yellow. Burnt umber is the neutral red, and ivory black is the neutral blue. And then so from there, it's basically two of each color. So two blues, a violet, so you get some secondary violet, two reds, orange, two yellows, green.
Right.
Basically, like the whole palette, the whole spectrum. So a lot of people don't have violet on their palette.
I love violet.
Yeah.
What do you have, manganese violet?
Cobalt violet.
Oh, cobalt. Oh, wow. Oh, you go expensive. Love that.
That's why I don't want to have like 40, paint tubes that are $60 a piece. But I think it'd be fun to just have like a set kind of palette.
Yeah, that's cool. There was, one of the things I did learn was that the American Impressionists, like their palette was, they're all pretty consistent too, the ones that are still carrying it on. But Tarbell, Benson, and I think most of them were using a lot of the same colors. And what they had was, I don't think they had any umbers. I don't think they had black on their palette. They had, I think, lead white, and not titanium. Titanium didn't...
it's new,
yeah, it wasn't really manufactured until about 1921. That's why when I see people like saying stuff about the Zorn palette, I'm like, Zorn died in 1919. He didn't use titanium white. Now, if you want to replace it and put that in, that's fine. Sure. Much less toxic. Yeah. But nobody should be eating their paints anyway. And titanium in high amounts wouldn't be good to eat either because it's a mineral. But lead white is so different from titanium. I mean, like, portrait painters love lead because it slowly gets you where you need to be, rather than titanium is like having a V8 and you tap the gas and you jump. But the American Impressionists, I found, and this was like digging, that they always had a red and orange, sorry, a red, a yellow, and a blue, and they had a split primary. So they had a warm and a cool of each one of those, so that they could tip either way. So they were always playing up the idea of warm, cool.
Yeah.
And then in addition to that, I think the color that they added was Viridian.
Okay.
But again, they have no violets.
Yeah.
But I feel like I see violets, so I'm like, they must have been.
Well, I mean, yeah. So, given if they have a cool red, warm blue, you could, get there just as easily, but it's nice to think of it as that other area of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Without having to mix in and depth.
Yeah.
It's just nice to think, because let's see if I can explain it to people. When I'm tipping a certain color and I want it to go cooler, if I'm in the yellow-orange area, if I add blue, it's going to tip it into this weird kind of area of the spectrum that is too much.
Yeah.
So if you're over in the yellow-oranges and you include violet, it cools it off. If I'm mixing yellow, orange, and violet, I could use a lot more orange and violet in that array. Over here, if I used yellow and orange, it would go warmer and then cooler. But if I had blue, it not only pulls it into the neutrals, which is not what I want, it makes it like this muddy, kind of gross.
Yeah.
Yellow, orange, and blue, I would probably very rarely, I mean, you can mix anything. So but like that's not the way I would cool that particular pile.
Yeah. I love the violets because typically they're weak. And manganese violet is very, very weak. Cobalt violet is ridiculously weak. It's as weak, almost like what lead white is going to do. So when you add it, it's gently pulling it to the destination. And I always talk about these as like when you're working with a model and you say, "Can you turn your head to the left?" and they go, right? Until you're like, no, just follow my hand. And it's like left is this.
Yes.
And it's like most of the time we want our paints in natural painting, which is what we're doing, to kind of gently pull, not to jump quickly. Yeah. Cobalt's just expensive, which is why I've dabbled with it, but I'm always like, I'm going to go towards manganese. And I think manganese was founded or created after cobalt as a replacement.
Yeah, I don't know why I've just been obsessed with cobalt violet for a long time. I've tried substitutes, but I always go back to cobalt violet.
Yeah, it's a great one.
I like it, and it's worth, for me, I always tell a story of when I was a student and I was just, racking up the credit card on supplies and whatever else, knowing that like I had enough confidence that one day it wouldn't be an issue.
To buy cobalt violet all the time?
just like to buy what you need.
Yeah.
You can't splurge because you can just waste your money.
Yeah.
But like if you need it, if you're going to be a professional painter, you have to get used to like, you just have to buy it.
Yeah.
You can't not buy it because it's expensive. In the sense that like, it's your profession.
Yeah. I agree.
If you don't make a profit after your expenses, well then so be it. It's like,
even so, a lot of the time I think the mentality, because I still get it all the time, where I'll go buy cadmium red, right? And then they come back with cadmium red hue, which is not cadmium red. It's marketed so that you buy it and it's $6 or $8 a tube. But a lot of the time cadmium red is going to last 10 times as long as the cadmium red hue anyway, so you might as well just buy it. I don't think I've ever gone through a tube in a year. I mean, cadmiums and cobalts are so strong that I'm like, they last a long time, sometimes like 10 years. So invest in those paints, everybody.
Yeah, no, it's good to use good materials. I recommend also using, like I do a lot of paintings on paper, gesso paper. You don't always have to paint on expensive canvas. To panel is, I use majority of panel. I've been returning back to canvas a little bit lately because when people hear oil on panel, sometimes collectors, the oil on canvas particularly is
romantic.
It just depends on which market, but
yeah. Me too. And I feel like linen. I don't know. There's something about it. I think it's beyond the romance. I think it's also just the way that paint works with it.
Yeah.
It feels like there's a bit of a texture, right?
Edges, the way the brush goes over the weave of the canvas is different. On a panel, it creates a different edge.
Yeah.
It's probably why I do so much sanding and scraping with the panel because you don't get the weave, allowing you to just kind of take that brush stroke and kind of soften it.
Yeah.
It's always much harder on a panel, so you have to do something to mitigate that hardness. So sanding and scraping when it's dry. I don't scrape on panel when it's wet as much because that's a more difficult maneuver. But when it's dry, I always just scrape it, and that kind of microscopically blends the edge and gives you a kind of a fresh start. And if you need more, then you can sand it.
So you'll wait for a passage to dry, and then you'll come back in and
before I start, I scrape. And then go ahead.
Do you always scrape, or do you just do it if you have to?
Pretty consistently. Yeah, just unless I like something that's happening, because I can always build up the paint again.
Yeah, well, I think that's also a confidence thing, because a lot of students are like, they think that that's the best eyelash or eye that they've ever done and never want to move it. And then they want to change the whole painting, right?
No, that's probably an experience thing.
Yeah.
Just even if you have a good eye, if you scrape it and paint it again, you could probably make it a little bit better.
Yeah.
It's just.
Well, sometimes that fogginess of going over another passage that was smoky already because you scraped it, and then now it's not covering it, but you're kind of like covering it with a branch, and there's that passage still kind of poking through, right?
Yeah, it creates what we go back to earlier, the unknown.
Yeah.
Everything's not predetermined. There's a lot of organic buildup of the energy within the piece that then gets fed back to the viewer.
Yeah.
That is something that so I say a lot that I want my paintings to be so messed up that people can't copy them.
That's awesome.
I want it to be so kind of like if you tried to copy it exactly, it would be really hard to figure out what
the scientists will just look at each other like.
Kind of,
no idea.
Because if you try to do layer separation, you just don't know if I oiled out one section and sanded it later where all the oil is gone. Then you just don't know if I then oil out on that sanded part.
It's so funny because that's probably exactly what we do when we go into a museum, right? And you're like, what are the working methods, right? I always tell my students to get yelled at for being too close, and it's
hard to figure out. I think there's a lot of unknowns.
I get asked a lot. Do you get asked this as an instructor? Like the Munsell system or something like that. Like, why don't you go get a swatch of it? Or how do you match that exactly? And I'm usually like I'm not trying to match anything. Like my whole thing is that I'm finding it on the surface, and that serendipitous moment of finding over the passage, which I couldn't have predicted, may have brought it to a different place that I'm like, oh, I like that more, and trying to maybe nail it or not. Do you get that?
So I think that people forget that Munsell is a language, and it was a pretty early language of color. It was arguably the first of like a clear scientific something you could reference on a universal level that would let someone know across seas when you write them a letter, when you don't have color photography, that you could say it's this note. This foliage I'm looking at is this right now in the spectrum.
So they're saying green.
Yeah, so like however you say FY, 5Y, whatever, however.
Yeah, hue value chroma.
Yeah, okay. So that's, but now I was just thinking as I was talking because now we have like in computer graphics and whatnot, you have like the
C-Lab.
hex, whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Hex number.
it's like probably millions of chips
Yeah.
as opposed to the Munzo system of these books.
Yeah.
But that's the same thing. It's a code for a specific spot on the spectrum.
Yeah.
So you don't get painters going around trying to mix this damn whatever, millions of. It's just to say, like, if you want to go up to my painting
Yeah.
and extract a scientific language of that
Dot.
note,
Yeah.
that dot, you can do it now to the millionth degree because we have the code.
Yeah.
In Manzel's time, it was just hundreds.
Yeah.
But like somewhere it got lost that like you have to mix these damn chips, that like you have to match it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm amazed. And part of me just thinks like, where's the art in it? Because I actually saw on Facebook that there was this thing that like, I could take a photo of you, right? If it's a good light, like you are now, send it to this company. They'll break it down into almost like what a notanizer would do. Notan, just take each value and break it down. It'll give you each little mixture for your paint by number, and then you put it back together. And I'm like, is that where we're going with it? Like, because it doesn't seem like what you and I are talking about, dancing or actively in pursuit of something totally different is what that is. Seems like a very clear,
It's being fluent in the language of color, basically.
Yeah.
So regardless of if I know exactly where the chip is, I'm envisioning going down, over to the left, into the center, or way out on the spectrum.
Yeah.
It's a spatial kind of language of. Now, if I were to be able to spit out that number, it would sound cool, but the point is that you understand how the system works and get there, get there with the note that you need.
Yeah. P-value chrome, I think, is a universal language. That's actually why in the book I started with it. But yeah, I feel like sometimes it's like, are we just getting closer to AI? And am I like a step closer to holding up my phone and then having it tell me what I should mix before an app is developed to say, Todd, Windsor green and titanium white match to this, put here. And it's like, I don't think that's what we're talking about here. We're in pursuit and in the moment. It seems like very surface, in my opinion.
Should we ask the robot what they think of Munzo?
Yeah, ask AI.
Have you ever done that?
No, you can do it.
So they have voice to text and text to voice now. So I'll just ask really quickly so you can hear it. This would be a fun demo for. Hey, can you tell me about the Munzo system of color that was developed in the early 20th century?
I'm not aware of a Munzo system of color from the early 20th century. It's possible that there might be some confusion or misinformation regarding this topic. If you could provide more details or clarify, I'd be happy to try to help further.
Wonderful. Well, I'm sitting with an expert on color, so Todd, why don't you... When was Munzo? What was his first name?
Albert Munsell, 1905. The Munsell system of color.
I believe you might be referring to Albert Henry Munsell, not Mansell. He was indeed a significant figure in the field of color theory. Albert Munsell developed the Munsell color system in the early 20th century, around 1905. This system is based on organizing colors according to three attributes: hue, value, and chroma. Hue refers to the dominant color family. Value indicates the lightness or darkness of the color. And chroma represents the color's saturation or intensity. Munsell's work laid the foundation for standardized color notation and has had a lasting impact on various fields, including art, design, and industry. If you have more specific questions or need further information, please feel free to ask.
No, that's everything. Thanks.
Responded with some flavor there. Slapped you for saying Munsell's
there you
name
go.
wrong.
There's your robot with a little bit.